Good evening, everybody. Coast to Coast, this is Douglas Essley. Among the stories which daily cross the news editor's desk, there is occasionally one which excites the imagination and demands further investigation. Such is the story of a World War II bomber apparently lost forever during a wartime mission, only to turn up 16 years later under circumstances which have caught the attention of both government officials and the general public. Tonight, the history of that airplane from her first mission to her final resting place. In just a few moments, Ghost Bomber, the Lady Be Good, on the Armstrong Circle Theatre. Armstrong Circle Theatre. This is the Lady Be Good, an American bombing plane type B-24G, serial number 4124301. Manufactured in 1942 in California, she lies now on a sand and gravel plateau deep within the Libyan Desert. Her final resting place, a vast uninhabited wasteland in north-central Africa. Nothing grows here because of the superheated air, which is almost completely free of any moisture. Only crudely mapped and almost completely uninhabited, the Libyan Desert remains one of the most desolate areas on the face of the globe, yet here lies the Lady Be Good. How did she get here? The answer can be found only by fitting together, as in a giant jigsaw puzzle, all the known facts about this plane and her crew. Her story begins in the spring of 1943, a fateful spring in the outcome of World War II. Europe is still in the hands of the Axis, seemingly impregnable in the west, still holding a firm front deep in Russian territory, secure to the north with the occupation of Norway. Only southern Europe, the French coast and the Italian boots, offering an inviting target for Allied invasion. Allied victories in the desert warfare of 1942 present the British and Americans stepping off points for this invasion, and airfields from which to soften enemy resistance in Italy, Sicily, and southern France. But these airfields must be hurriedly carved from the desert floor. If southern Europe is to be invaded in 1943, there is no time to wait for concrete landing strips, nor is there time to wait for well-trained airmen. Instead, men such as these, pilots, navigators, bombardiers, American airmen with little or no combat experience, must bear the burden and drive against the enemy. These men are members of the 376th Bomber Command, 9th Bomber Command, their base, Soluch, Libya, 30 miles south of war-torn Benghazi. The date, April 4, 1943. This pilot is First Lieutenant Paul Solon, age 22, hometown Brooklyn, New York. This pilot is Solon's friend since early training days, First Lieutenant William J. Hatton's home, Queens, New York. His age 26, his plane, the Lady Be Good.
All right, gentlemen, if you'll give me your attention. Today's primary target will be Naples. You'll be hitting the dock area. The docks themselves, any ships tied up there, and fuel dumps in the vicinity. Now, Naples is approximately 750 miles from our base here. You'll go by way of Cape Rizzuto, lie west to 39 degrees north latitude, 13 degrees 10 minutes east longitude. Then you'll turn north to your initial point, 40 degrees 50 minutes north latitude, 13 degrees 20 minutes east longitude. You'll turn at your initial point and make your bombing run at 90 degrees at 23,000 feet. After your bomb run, rally to a course of 150 degrees. On the way home, you'll stay together until you hit the Mediterranean at the bottom of the boot. Then return individually to Soluch. Your alternate target, if for some reason you can't hit Naples, is here, Crotone. on the southwest edge of the Gulf of Taranto. Your alternate field in case of trouble is here, Malta. Now you'll be flying in your regular squadron position. If for any reason you have to break formation, just fall out. And remember, I don't want anybody on the radio unless it's an emergency. Otherwise, you might find some ME-109s on your tail. You'll probably hit heavy flak over the target. And enemy fighters may bother you anywhere along the coast of Italy. Also, on the way home, you may pick up some enemy diversionary signals from Sicily on your radio compass. You'll travel a long way over open water. You'll be carrying 9 500-pound general-purpose bombs. All right? Let's check out the weather. You'll have headwinds on the way over, 20 knots at ground altitude and about 80 knots at flight altitude. Rain probably over the Mediterranean. Some ground haze at the target, otherwise clear. Your cloud formation will run cumulus and stratocumulus over Soluch from 5 to 15,000 feet. Your takeoff time is 12:30 hours. Any questions? All right. Good luck.
These men, almost all new arrivals from training bases in the States, represent the only B-24 mission from Africa on this day.
Have a good trip, Bill.
Well, I got a good crew, Paul.
Well, once you get this one under your belt, it'll leave me a better one. We were all scared stiff my first the other day. We didn't start acting like a team till we were halfway back.
Well, I'm glad my aircraft's ready to go today. I didn't mind flying co-pilot with her day before yesterday, but I'd rather have my own plane.
Well, you got it. Good luck.
Same to you.
This is the formation that the 376th Bomber Group flies on April 4th, 1943. Essentially 4 boxes with 6 aircraft in each box, except the third box, in which there are 7. Lieutenant Fallon is in the first box. Lieutenant Hatton, in the Lady Be Good, is in the 4th box. The first 2 boxes, designated A section, will fly some 20 minutes ahead of and out of visual contact with the last 2 boxes, or B section. This is Soluch, air pleasant clouds of sand whipped up by spinning propellers and occasional sand storms. Sand which clogs engines, fouls instruments, that sort of thing. Plenty of trouble. At 12:30 hours on April 4th, 1943, Mission 109, target Naples, Italy, begins to take off. By 12:45 hours, the section clears the field. The entire mission is airborne. This map represents the route of B section, the Mission 109, from Soluch, here, to Naples. These planes are the aircraft involved. Following their progress, we can visualize the course of the mission. At 13:35, the Lady Be Good joins the formation. It is her first combat mission. It is also the first combat mission as pilot for Lieutenant Hatton, and the second for her co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Robert F. Toner of North Attleboro, Massachusetts, age 26.
Check fuel siphoning right.
None.
Bob, you want to make the intercom check?
Right. Co-pilot to crew. Everybody in position? How do you read me?
Toner makes a check of each man of the crew of the Lady Be Good. The navigator, Second Lieutenant B.P. Hayes of Lee's Summit, Missouri, age 24. Flight engineer, Tech Sergeant Harold J. Ripslinger, home, Saginaw, Michigan, age 23. The bombardier, Second Lieutenant John Warabka, home, Cleveland, Ohio, age 26. Radio operator, Tech Sergeant Robert E. Lamont, home, Lake Linden, Michigan, age 24. and the gunner, Staff Sergeant Guy E. Shelley, Jr. of New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, age 28. Vernon L. Moore of New Boston, Ohio, 22. Staff Sergeant Samuel Adams, Eureka, Illinois, 23. For all these men, Mission 109 is the first combat mission they've flown.
Might as well settle down. It's going to be a long haul. The way we sucked up sand on takeoff, it's a miracle those engines are still running. How you doing, men? Just fine, DP. If you need anything, just call. Need a navigator? Are you kidding? It's just follow the leader all the way to Naples. You'll be singing another tune on the way back.
Section B of Mission 109 flies without incident toward the Italian coast for approximately 3 hours. Then at 1600 hours, Lieutenant F.C. Wright, flying parallel to the Lady Be Good in the fourth box, loses an engine and heads for home. With Lieutenant Wright's aircraft out of formation, Section B now consists of 12 aircraft. 5 minutes later, J.O. Britt's plane, just ahead of the Lady Be Good, which is here, this is Britt's plane, springs a fuel leak and turns back. At 1610 hours, Major John Levin's plane, flying in the third box, develops stroke in her number 1 engine and loses formation. With the loss of Levin's plane, B section is now down to 10 aircraft. At 1740 hours, Lieutenant F.W. Milam, flying to the rear of the Lady Be Good in the fourth box, loses control of the propeller. The propeller is finally stabilized, but is pulling no power. So, the aircraft turns back to Soluch. There are 9 aircraft now in Section B. 5 minutes later, at 1745 hours, another aircraft in the third box loses 2 engines due to the clogging effects of the sand. This aircraft, commanded by Lieutenant K.P. Iverson, drops out of formation. B section now consists of 8 planes at that time. That time, 1800 hours, the formation began to pass just north of the island of Stromboli, about 150 miles southwest of Naples. Minutes later, Captain M.R. Walsh's plane leaves the formation due to poor engine performance and heads for an alternate target, Coton. B section now consists of 7 planes. This number drops to 6 10 minutes later when Lieutenant E.J. Feely's aircraft, leading the fourth box, loses power in her number 3 engine and heads for home.
Hey, we're getting to be a chummy little crew. No sweat for us yet. I got my fingers crossed. Bill, we're really getting up there. How about oxygen? Right. Pilot the crew. Okay, let's get on oxygen, fellas. And DP, give me a position, will you? The way these birds are dropping out, we may be leading this wingding any minute.
Navigator to pilot. Getting on oxygen in position coming up.
At 1812 hours, Lieutenant D.E. Lear drops to a lower altitude, 1820 hours actually, to revive a waist gunner whose oxygen mask is full frozen. Falling far behind, he heads for the alternate target. B section now consists of 5 aircraft. And that number is reduced to 4 when at 1825 hours, Lieutenant McCain's ship, at that moment leading the formation, dives for the same reason. And he also heads for the alternate target. Remaining are 2 planes in the third box and 2 planes in the fourth.
Catching a pack of trouble. Maybe A section. Now he's got our luck. Hey, those 2-thirds ahead of us are hanging back. Looks like they're going to fly our way. I better give this bird a little more throttle. Hey, DP, you got that position I asked you for? Yeah, the way I figure, we're about 50 miles south of Naples. Hold your heading, we ought to be on the nose. Roger, DP. Well, it's getting dark. We better check Johnny on his problem. Right. How's the bombardier? Hey, Johnny, you got enough light to make a decent run? Well, Bill, I'm all right for the moment, but I don't know for how long. Roger, we'll move it along as fast as we can.
At 1830 hours, the Lady Be Good becomes the lead aircraft in B section, Mission 109. At 1835 hours, the sun has already begun to set over Naples at the Lady Be Good's altitude, 23,000 feet. On the ground, it's already quite dark. 15 minutes later, at 1850 hours, the four-plane formation is over Sorrento, Italy, 30 miles south of Naples.
I don't think we're going to make it. Pilot the bombardier. Johnny, what's the story on your light conditions? We've had it, Bill. I'd have to have the Chicago fire down there to make a decent run. Roger, Johnny. What do you think? I think we turn around. You want me to get in touch with the other birds? No, they'll follow me when I head for home. I better get a heading. Pilot the navigator. CP, give me a heading for Soluch. We're going home.
At 1853 hours, with darkness closing in, on the radarless Lady Be Good, the navigator plots a course on which to return to Soluch.
Thanks, CP. Heading 150. How about an ETA, DP?
Hatton also requests an ETA, or estimated time of arrival at Soluch, based on airspeed, altitude, wind, and heading.
ETA 2215. ETA 2215. Okay, let's head for home.
At 21:45 hours, Lieutenant W.C. Swarner's aircraft lands at Soluch, to be followed at 22:10 hours by Lieutenant L.A. Worley's aircraft. Lieutenant E.A. Gluck, who has run low on fuel, has already landed at Malta, the nearest friendly air base. Approximately 10 hours after takeoff, Mission 109 from Soluch, only the Lady Be Good is still in the air.
And what about blast over the target?
There was plenty of it, Major. You could get out and walk on it. My aircraft looks like a sieve. 20-some-odd holes, 2 control cables shot away.
Did you have any trouble getting home?
Oh, we picked up some enemy diversionary signals on our radio compass from Sicily, but we homed in pretty good and caught the light beacon about 50 miles out.
Right. You have anything to add?
No.
Okay, that'll be all. Thank you, Lieutenant. Lieutenant Swanson.
According to routine procedure, each pilot is interrogated immediately after returning from his mission by the group intelligence officer.
Hey, Wally, what time did you touch down?
About 5 minutes ago.
Hatton come in with you?
Not that I know of. Some planes still up there, though.
Getting late.
Maybe they landed at Malta.
Yeah. Could be.
The time, 22:15, the estimated time of arrival of the Lady Be Good at Soluch. But the Lady Be Good is still in the air.
It ought to be any minute now. You see anything, Bob? Not a thing. Hey, Lamont, you picking up anything interesting on that radio of yours? Not a thing, Lieutenant. Okay, keep your ears open. We ought to be over Soluch just about now. You guys see anything yet? Not yet. I'd better recheck my ETA. Stop worrying. We'll catch the light any minute now. Oh, we'll pick up the radio beacon. That tailwind may not be as strong as I figured. I'll check my calculations just to be sure. Sure is dark down there.
For another hour, the Lady Be Good continues on course as the crew searches for some sign of the beacon light.
Couple hours of fuel left, Bob? Yeah, if we keep her throttle down like we got her. We couldn't have missed both the beacon light and the radio homing signal. Well, it must be the tailwind that messed us up. We should have been over Soluch an hour ago. I've checked those figures 100 times. Well, something's out of whack. We just can't keep going like this. Radio silence or no radio silence, we gotta find out where we are. Hey, Lamont, switch your radio to emergency transmission. Maybe you can get a bearing from ground radio. Roger, Lieutenant.
Shortly after 21 hours, the radio operator switches his radio to emergency transmission and attempts to obtain a bearing or position report on the Lady Be Good.
Calling August. This is Red Wing 4. This is Red Wing 4 calling August. Inbound to station, requesting a CF steering. This is Red Wing 4. This is Red Wing 4 calling August.
August, this is Red Wing 4. This is Red Wing 4. This is Red Wing 4 requesting a DF steer. Over.
The Lady Be Good's call for help is received at this station at Bamina, 14 miles from Soluch. an HFDF station. HFDF standing for High Frequency Direction Finding Station, manned by the British with American liaison personnel.
I'm getting an emergency signal from one of your aircraft, Lieutenant. Red Wing 4?
Okay, I'll check it out. Red Wing 4, that's aircraft number 64, flight 376. It's ours. It's okay. You better give him a bearing, Sergeant.
Red Wing 4, Red Wing 4. This is August. This is August. Give me a count and I'll give you the bearing.
Roger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, over.
Roger, Red Wing 4. Your bearing is 330. Acknowledge. Your bearing is 330. Acknowledge.
They're right on the line. They ought to be coming in any minute.
Red Wing 4 confirming bearing 330. Confirming bearing 330.
Roger, Red Wing 4.
Red
Over.
Wing 4 out. Red Wing 4 out.
This emergency call marks the last sign of the Lady Be Good for more than 15 years, and it's the end of the first part of her strange history. The second part of the story of the Lady Be Good, which disappeared on April 4th, 1943, is told for the most part in this stack of official documents. The first is a routine report on the mission filed with 9th Bomber Command, the 9th Air Force, on the morning of April 5th, 1943 by the 376 Bomb Group. The report, classified most secret, ends with these words: Aircraft 64, Lieutenant Hatton, unaccounted for. The next document is dated exactly a year later, April 5th, 1944. And this is a report made by the Status Review and Determination Section of the U.S. Army's Adjutant General's Department. In this routine determination of status, the following recommendation is made.
Contrary, from either the Prisoner of War Bureau or the Memorial Division or any other official agency, we recommend that the crew of the B-24D, which disappeared on 4 April 1943, be presumed dead in action.
The next official mention of the Lady Be Good is made in this report of an investigation of the Naples area by an officer in the Air Corps Casualty Clearance Detachment, dated April 9, 1946.
I made an investigation attempting to find pieces of a B-24D aircraft, serial number 4124301, and remains its crew. I covered the port area from Castel dell'Ove to San Giovanni, questioning fishermen, longshoremen, dockhands, port guards, and even casual idlers, without eliciting any information concerning the above-mentioned plane.
2 years later, on June 15, 1948, another and final report is made by a board of officers of the American Graves Registration Service, the unit responsible for the identification and burial of American war dead. Considering the case of the Lady Be Good as part of its routine review procedure, the report concludes with the following recommendation.
In view of all evidence presented at this meeting and herewith attached, it is the recommendation of this board that no further attempt toward identification or recovery of the officers and enlisted men of the B-24 identified herein be made, and that their remains be declared non-recoverable, and that the case of Lieutenant Hatton and the crew of the B-24D, serial number 41-24301, be declared officially closed.
With this document, the second part of the story of the Lady Be Good is over. The plane and her crew cease to be of active concern to the United States government. No clue to the Lady Be Good's fate had been discovered. There's no reason to imagine that any would be. But 11 years later, the third chapter of the Lady Be Good story began. In May 1959, a British oil exploration team, using specially devised desert vehicles and penetrating deep into the Libyan Desert, came across this propeller. And eventually found this plane, an American bomber with the number 64 plainly discernible on her fuselage. After 16 years, the Lady Be Good had reappeared. Now, the exact point of the Lady Be Good's final resting place is here, at the end of a direct line from Naples through Soluch, to this point. 26 degrees, 42 minutes, north latitude, 24 degrees, 1 minute, east longitude. It's about 475 miles south of Soluch. The terrain can be included among the world's worst, with the Libyan sand sea in here forming a sort of an inverted U up to the north, and a 2,300-foot mountain range sealing off the area down here to the south. The mere discovery of the Lady Be Good is not in itself startling, but her condition and state of her equipment pose some intriguing and perhaps unanswerable questions. To describe the Lady Be Good as she was found on the desert floor, we have with us Major William Robertus, one of the first to examine the hull. Good evening, Major.
Good evening, Mr. Edwards.
You're stationed at the wheelless airbase.
Yes, I am. And when we received the reports of the discovery of the plane, we decided to attempt a landing on the desert in order to get more information, and if possible, find out what happened to the crew. We loaded a C-47 with enough fuel to make the round trip and took off. Even though we knew her exact position, just finding the Lady Be Good was difficult. In that area of the desert, the surface all looks the same, and the available maps are, for the most part, incomplete. But after searching for some time, we spotted Blockhouse Rock, and from there we flew on to the B-24. The desert floor was smooth and made an ideal runway, so we had no trouble with the landing. From where we stopped, the lady appeared almost undamaged, but when we walked closer, we could see the break just behind her wing. 3 of the props were bent and dug into the sand, and the 4th was some distance from the plane, where it came to rest when number 4 engine was torn loose.
Were there any other signs of superficial damage, Major?
No, there were no bullet or flak holes, no patches, or any signs of battle damage. In fact, because of the almost unbelievable dryness of the desert, the Lady Be Good presented a strange picture. But I think we were most surprised when we climbed inside. The interior was in perfect condition, not considering landing damage. The radio was in perfect working order. Oxygen bottles still held pressure. Fire extinguishers still held fluid. Cold weather flying suits were hung neatly. Cigarettes, chewing gum, bits of rations, still well preserved were aboard. Signal flare equipment was in its proper place. In fact, later that day, we fired the flares, and they all worked perfectly. Another item we found was a half-filled thermos of coffee, which, by the way, we sampled and found still drinkable. We also found the flight report forms undamaged, and the maintenance record. I have a photostat of that record here. Also undamaged and filled out to the day before the aircraft was listed as missing. All flight instruments appeared intact and accurate. And here's one of the oxygen bottles I described. It still registers pressure.
Yes, I see. You said the radio was in working order. Did you test it, Major?
Well, more than that, I used it. Our radio went out on the way down that day. We pulled the Lady Be Good's radio out, hitched it up to our system, and it worked perfectly.
What else did you find?
Well, on closer examination, we found that the guns were loaded and in working order. The landing gear was relatively undamaged and apparently retracted at the time of impact. And after a pretty thorough examination of the Lady Be Good, we asked ourselves 2 major questions. 1, how did she come to be more than 500 miles southeast of her last reported position? And 2, and most important, what had happened to Happen, Toner, and the rest?
You found no clues to the fate of the men?
No, not in the immediate area. We found no trace of the crew, no parachutes, clothing, anywhere around the plane. And the fact that this was desert, and the plane still contained many useful survival items, indicated that the plane and the crew didn't come down together.
Was a further search made for the crew of the Lady Be Good, Major?
Yes, and one with interesting results. Captain Myron C. Fuller of the Army Quartermaster Mortuary System, who's here tonight, can probably give you a more complete picture of that than I can. But before he takes over, I'd like to add one thing. The condition of the Lady Be Good when we found her was really remarkable. Not a spot of rust, all fabric intact, rubber still resilient, and almost all equipment in working order. All this after 16 years.
Thank you very much, Major Robertus. So now I'd like you to meet Captain Myron C. Fuller of the Army Quartermaster Mortuary System. Captain Fuller, how did you get into the Lady Be Good picture?
Well, it is a function of the Army Quartermaster Mortuary System to recover and identify remains of World War II dead discovered in Europe and Africa. Our unit in Frankfurt was advised of the discovery of the Lady Be Good. Our anthropologist and I flew down to the area to determine the possibility of making a search for the bodies of the crew. From an examination of the plane, we deduced that the men had left the Lady Be Good a short time before her descent.
knowing where the crew had bailed out, made an attempt to recover their remains practical. Homemade sun compasses attached to our trucks to navigate, we ventured north, keeping a 10-mile strip. The sun compass is a simple device. Once the vehicle is placed on the desired course, the driver can hold direction by keeping the shadow on the same line on the board. On the first day of the sweeping action to the north, we discovered these boots. They undoubtedly belonged to one of the crew of the Lady Be Good. They were probably taken off because of their weight and heat. In 1943, bomber crews normally wore regular boots inside their flight boots to cover a situation like this. These boots were our first clue to the fates of the men of the Lady Be Good. Since there was a strong possibility that these boots might represent the bailout area, we searched this 6-mile square, centered on them. We hoped to find other gear, possibly the remains of someone injured in jumping. During the search, we ran across the World War II trail heading northwest at 340 degrees. This was a 5-vehicle trail which we believe was made by Italian vehicles, possibly escaping from British forces. The direction of the trail was toward the base of Soluch. We put ourselves in the place of those men. If we were walking north across a trackless waste and found a trail leading toward our home base, we'd follow it. Searching northward along the trail, we found this. Parachute laid out in the form of an arrow pointing northward along the trail. It was weighed down with rocks to keep the shape of an arrow and to keep it from blowing away. Continuing northward that day, we found 6 more of these markers. Later, we were to find the remaining 3. In addition to the chute markers, we found another pair of boots, shroud lines, helmets, and harness straps. Then, just beyond the last marker, we found this other trail, crossing and running northeast into the Sand Sea. These 2 trails, then, centered our search. We then filled in the triangle between them and searched the jump area. Remains of the crew were not in this area. 2 additional search missions then completed our work. First into the sand west of Blockhouse Rock, looking for remains reported in that area. There was only the skeleton of a large bird, however. Second, we searched north into the Sand Sea to confirm and deny reported abandoned vehicles and remains. They were not in the area reported.
What is your theory as to the fate of the men of the Lady Be Good, sir?
We feel that the men bailed out and walked north individually until they struck the World War II trail. Here they left their chutes as markers and followed the track northward. They had no idea, we feel, that they were more than 400 miles from Benghazi. Trudging along north, they could see the dunes 25 miles ahead. Probably staggering from thirst and exertion, the men must have associated these dunes with those along the coast. We feel that they staggered on into the dunes and died, and their remains were buried with the shifting sand.
Thank you very much, Captain Fuller. Painstaking work by both Army and Air Force personnel have brought together all the available information concerning the fate of the Lady Be Good. This information, when it's assessed and analyzed by experts, can help us begin to fit the pieces of this strange and giant jigsaw puzzle together. The Army's thorough search of the Libyan Desert answers some questions concerning the fate of the crew of the Lady Be Good, but what are the other questions that the discovery of the missing aircraft raised? How did the Lady Be Good end up more than 400 miles away from her home base? And why did her crew leave the well-stocked aircraft, which contained a radio in working order, to strike out across unknown terrain? Well, to find out answers to these questions, we have to know something about the navigational practices in North Africa at this time. With us tonight, Major Paul Fallon, who flew in the section ahead of the Lady Be Good on that April 4th, 1943. How are you tonight, sir? Good evening, sir. What was Soluch like in April 1943, Major?
Well, it was really just a sand strip surrounded by tents. The wind was blowing all the time, but even though it was rainy and wet, the surface would dry quickly. As a result, blowing sand was a major problem in maintaining our engines.
This mission on April 4th was your 3rd combat mission, was it not?
That's right.
But it was Hatton's first, is that right?
Not quite correct. At the time, it was standard procedure to assign newly arrived pilots, as well as co-pilots more experienced men for a mission or two. Although quite often, as in my case, A shortage of experienced pilots caused even the new pilots to go out on their first mission in command of their own aircraft. Bill did fly one mission as co-pilot on a plane, which had to turn back 25 minutes out of Soluch with engine trouble.
But for practical purposes, this was Lieutenant Hatton's real first mission, either as a pilot or a co-pilot.
That's right.
Did you yourself experience any difficulty returning from Naples on the night of April 4th, 1943?
Well, Soluch wasn't an easy place to find. There were basically only two navigational aids. A visual one, a light beacon, which is visible for about 50 miles, and a low-power radio beacon, which could be picked up at best at about 70 miles of Soluch. Since Soluch was such a difficult place to find, my navigator and I decided to use celestial navigation, using the landfall method.
Well, perhaps you could illustrate this for us.
With a known position here, and flying with unreliable winds, we did not aim directly at Benghazi, which altered an attempt to determine a heading which would take us directly over the base would be unrealistic. Consequently, we determined a heading which, regardless of the direction of the wind, would bring the aircraft definitely to a point west of Benghazi. The problem was the relative strength of the wind. On this relied the accuracy of our ETA at this approximate point. Here is where we use celestial navigation. We stayed above the clouds as much as possible to enable a navigator to shoot a series of star lines. Each one of these star lines gave him an accurate position of his latitude. So, after the first two or three of these, taken at approximately half-hour intervals, the navigator could get an accurate reading of our ground speed. This meant that since we knew we would arrive at some point along a reference line due west of Benghazi, taking the latitude of Benghazi as a reference, and knowing our ground speed, we could almost tell to the minute when we reached this line. Upon reaching this line, we turned east. Since our original heading was such that we couldn't be more than, say, 100 miles west of Benghazi, the relative effect of the winds in this short flight toward base was considerably less than in a long trip from Naples to Soluch. And we knew exactly which side of the base we'd be on. In actual fact, I picked up the radio home within a few minutes after turning, and letting down through the clouds, I picked up the light beacon.
Well, now, did most of the planes use this method of returning home, celestial navigation, rather than dead reckoning, Major?
I would say yes. Even though star lines only give you your latitude, you at least know your relative position. While with dead reckoning, your wind information has to be completely reliable, or you can be lost.
I see. Thank you very much, Major Fallon. With us tonight is more information about circumstances surrounding the disappearance of the Lady Be Good, and to help us put the pieces of this puzzle together is Colonel Norman C. Appold, Assistant to the Commander, Air Research and Development Command. Colonel Appold was on April 4th, 1943. On that date, the operations officer of the Lady Be Good squad. Good evening, Colonel.
Good evening, Mr. Edwards.
First of all, do you remember the night that the Lady Be Good disappeared?
Yes, I remember that the plane was overdue and received the report that she had asked for a bearing from the Benina HFDF station. I also remember that our group alerted all of the American and Allied radio stations and the airfields on the Mediterranean coast to the fact that she was overdue, and asked them to keep their ears open for her.
What do you think happened to the Lady Be Good, Colonel?
Well, let us go to the map here. At a point south of Naples, when the Lady Be Good turned for home, the navigator provided the pilot with an ETA direct to Soluch, based on the known wind that had been given to him at the briefing. Now, herein developed some of the factors that ultimately led to the Lady Be Good's fate. In the first place, the winds were higher than were briefed. Secondly, there were shifting winds from the nose at the lower altitude of the returning aircraft. Third, the altitude that had been chosen by Lieutenant Hatton was for the purpose of providing celestial fixes on the way home because of the cloud cover at the lower altitude. Therefore, there were rather high tailwinds being experienced by the crew unknown to them. Now, the tailwinds increased the ground speed so that the aircraft arrival over Soluch would be well ahead of their calculated estimated time of arrival. The question of celestial fixes
was explained, or could be explained generally this way. The crew was relatively inexperienced, and of course the navigator making his celestial fixes could not compare them to his satisfaction against the estimated times that he was making good. Therefore, he was somewhat concerned about this problem and probably did not place confidence in the celestial fixes that he was taking. Now there's another problem that was associated with the business of returning to Soluch. Approximately 15 minutes prior to an estimated time of arrival, shall we say approximately there, the pilot will commence his descent to lower altitudes in order to prepare for the landing operation. And, of course, he would desire to turn on his radio compass in order to take a bearing to Soluch itself. Now then, if he tunes in his radio compass and receives, shall we say, Soluch, this particular point, the needle in the cockpit will swing around to the front of the airplane.
I wonder if you'd explain that a bit more in detail, please, sir.
Yes. I have here an indicator that is used in the aircraft of the type that Hatton flew. Now, this indicator has a needle on it, and the receiver to which it is connected, the radio compass, is a receiver which automatically points to a radio station to which it is tuned. Now, this indicator indicates to the pilot the direction of the radio signal. Installed as it is in the airplane, when it points straight up, it points to the nose of the airplane or to a signal which is in front. If instead the needle moves around and swings to the rear, it points to a signal that is behind the airplane. Now, we had pointed out earlier to you that Lieutenant Hatton made a descent which he believed to take place in approximately this position. In actuality, because of the high ground speeds he was making good, he was in a position somewhat southeast of Soluch, so that the needle of the radio compass swung to the rear. At this particular point, he was somewhat concerned. Having received a signal which indicated the pointing of a station to the rear of the aircraft, we feel that he estimated that he was receiving a signal from a very high-powered beacon station operated by the Germans in Sicily. Actually, he did arrive at a lower altitude, as he had planned to, but with that beacon station pointing to the rear, he was concerned and confused about this problem and continued on for some period of time, roughly 3/4 of an hour more. And as you will recall, attempted to contact then the HFDF station at Benina for a bearing.
Would that bearing give the lady a fixed position, Colonel?
No, it would not do this. A bearing is really only a position along a line between the HFDF station and the aircraft. And that line could be either to the northwesterly direction, as in this case, or the southeasterly direction, and the crew, feeling that they were still north of the station, received what they thought the reassuring signal that they were inbound to Soluch. They thought they were north. In reality, they were already far south.
Couldn't they tell they were over the desert and not the Mediterranean?
Not exactly. Actually, the light from the stars, which was about all they had to work with, is quite dim at night, and even from the lower altitudes, the sand looked much like the water. Some of the most experienced pilots and navigators were not able to distinguish the land from the water. There were no distinguishing marks.
Do you feel the navigator was still taking star fixes?
At this point, I seriously doubt this. After all, they had now flown approximately an hour and a half beyond their ETA. Their fuel was getting low, and they were anxiously searching for the coast.
Well, now, what about the radio? Why didn't they use it?
Well, I frankly believe that they did use their radio again. Now, after all, the pilot was quite concerned about the situation that he was in, and he was attempting, I believe, in some way to ascertain his exact position, even to the extent of again turning on his command receiver and listening for signals that might give him a clue that he was in the vicinity of Soluch. Actually, I believe that he might have transmitted on his VHF very high-frequency transmitter, which had shorter range than the transmitter of the radio operator, and requested some assistance in his dilemma. But he was too far south of Soluch to be heard. Pilots, of course, are eternally optimistic, and not having an exact idea of where he was, he continued to forge ahead. The entire crew was alerted for an emergency, and not wanting to bail out over water, they decided to maintain altitude as long as possible. One engine failed, and then the pilot returned the aircraft, still searching for what he thought was land ahead. Finally, after the second engine went out, they saw, we believe, what were the first signs of land, the dark and rocky patches ahead, the dunes against the low plateau. They believed now they were over land and continued southeast to find Soluch, then Nina, or Benghazi. Finally, the crew was alerted on standby, and I'm sure that Lieutenant Hatton advised them that in the event of bailout, since they had passed over a shoreline, that they should head north after bailout. The third engine failed, and the pilot then ordered bailout, made his final trim adjustments, and bailed out himself.
Why do you think they made no effort to find the plane?
Well, after all, at this particular point, they felt they had crossed some indication of a coastline, and they had better head north for that coastline rather than search for an aircraft which was lost in the desert to the south. They thought they perhaps even could make it in one night of marching, and they headed north into the sand seas instead of the water.
What do you think are the major factors which contributed to the loss of the Lady Be Good, Colonel?
Well, I believe, Mr. Edwards, that there are 5 major factors. First, the higher headwinds on the way to the target than those that they received at the briefing. Secondly, the higher altitude on return gave them a higher ground speed than anticipated. Third, interpretation of the radio compass. Fourth, the HSDF bearing from Benina. And fifth, the amazing similarity of the desert and water areas.
Thank you very much, Colonel Apple.